Hi, I'm Jordan, and a few weeks ago I interviewed my friend Arthur Kopatsi about why he decided to bike the Tour Divide. It's about a 2,700-mile race from Canada to Mexico. He's 2,000 miles in, and rather than ask him to record himself on camera again, I thought it would be best to simply make an audio recording so that he could feel very comfortable answering questions that I had. So here are some pictures from where he's at and an audio recording about what Arthur's up to. I hope you enjoy.
All right, John, and I'm going to go through your questions. What's the condition of your body? Overall, like all things considered, it's not bad. My knee, which was the thing I was really worried about, has been totally fine. I managed it pretty well. At the beginning, I was on ibuprofen for a few days throughout the day. Then eventually, I started doing only at night, so I would shave off any inflammation that I would have throughout the night. Throughout the time that I would sleep. And then eventually, like the last few days, I actually didn't take any ibuprofen, so that was all good. My left hand has some nerve damage where I can't really extend some of my fingers, but I'm hoping that will. Usually that comes back in terms of within weeks or month. My feet are pretty numb. They're not numb. They're kind of. It's like I've been riding. I've had like a lot of issues with my feet and nails until Warm Sutter in Wyoming, where I realized that I just didn't have enough room. Maybe my feet were swollen or something. I didn't have enough room in my shoes, so I took off the insole. So I've been riding without insoles for the last week, I would say. That has been like awesome, having room to like move my toes. So it has been way better on my toes, but like obviously for the sole of my feet, it's been a little hard, but nothing really bad. The main issue of the last few days has been my neck. Like after 6 to 10 hours on the bike, I couldn't raise my head to look forward for too long, especially on downhill where you need to raise your head a little further up. It would seize up, like kind of like doing abs and like just staying in the abs position. At some point, you're like you start shaking. It just contracts and you can't sustain it. Same thing with my neck. So I would have to stop. It was really annoying. Just like there were days where like I spent so much time just looking at my feet and lifting my head for like a couple seconds just to make sure I was going straight. Like on roads, sometimes I would just look at the white lines and to make sure that I was going straight. That was annoying. Tried a few things like moving my camel back onto my handlebar. I actually rode a lot of the climbs over the last few days without a helmet, just to remove some weight from my neck. That helped. But after 10, 12, 15 hours, it will still come back. Why do you keep getting on the bike? Well, because that's the only way to move forward. Sometimes you're in the middle of nowhere, so you gotta get on the bike wherever you want to go, and then over time, your body and mind warms up. I don't know, it becomes mechanical. You've been consistently tracking 7th to 12th. How do you feel about that place? What are you competing against? I've been actually training now my ranking because I know I'm competitive, and that was kind of like messing up with everything else that I talked about earlier. Obviously top 10 would have been great for like again like that reward of like, oh, I finished top 10, but that kind of went away when I had experienced like issues with my bike, and then I lost my satellite tracker on the route, and so at that point it became just not a. It was I was not part of the race really anymore, so it was more like I'm doing it for myself entirely. And I think it was a blessing. Kind of allowed me to ask myself whether I wanted to do it and how far I wanted to do it. I wasn't really competing against other people really. I was more competing against like the time marker. My goal in my head was like I want to do it in 20 days, top. So that's what I was competing against. It's been about 10 days, actually 15 now. You spend most of your waking hours pedaling. Do you listen to music, audiobooks? How do you keep yourself entertained? I don't, well, I have one playlist that I'm a little uh, fed up with, uh, that I probably listen to a few hours a day. I don't have audiobooks. I don't think I could focus on like an actual discussion. I actually did listen to some podcast yesterday or 2 days ago, but that hasn't been like something I've done a lot. Um, I've actually, when I would get into town, like it would download like the up first thing from NPR, so it would be my 15 minutes a day where I would listen to keep track of all the Trump stories. So that was entertaining, but otherwise it would mostly just be. I mean, you just get into a mindset of like where your head is kind of numb, and that's when it's good. The thing is, when your head is not numb, then it's suffering. When it's numb, you just keep moving. That's actually pretty good. One thing I've done, since it will actually sound pretty stupid, was like sometimes I would just count pedal strokes. So it would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I don't know for how long I would do that, but it would help, especially on climbs. What do you eat most days? How often and where? Um, what do I eat? Really, you eat whatever you find. Usually, the most, like, the thing that is available, and that's another thing of like racing, is like stops are sparse and I can carry a lot on my bike. I'm not really set up for touring. I'm not set up at all for touring. I can carry stuff for like a day top. So you usually end up in like places late at night, and the only thing available at best will be a subway, at worst will be a gas station. Well, actually, at worst will be nothing. So I've had a lot of subways. They don't hold very well. I mean, in Montana and Canada, it's fine. It's cold, so they hold well. When you get Colorado, you don't want to. Your foot long becomes a living thing. And I've had a lot of Kit Kats and Twix and M&Ms and cereal bars and naked juice and orange juice and Coke. A lot of Coke. That's usually Gatorade too. That's usually what I eat along the way. Try to eat as often as possible. Carrying burgers is fine too. It's kind of disgusting because usually you go without any sauce or anything because that doesn't hold well. So kind of it's kind of dry and force yourself to eat, especially with the heat. The heat makes everything a little harder because you need more water and every food becomes disgusting and all the chocolate that I like just melts and is impossible to eat. Have you been riding with people? How does that feel? I've been riding with a couple different people. It feels good to have a human connection, to be able to share what you see, break the monotony of the whole thing. But at the same time, it doesn't feel right either, because then you feel obliged to wait or accelerate to catch up with them. Like, let's say you want to, as simple as that, you want to take a piss and you just want to take your time and you wait, or you do it and then you accelerate, or like you don't go at your own pace, whether it's in your mind or in your legs. Like you just don't. It makes every decision a little harder to make. Instead of slowing down and not realizing that when you're tired, like then suddenly you've got that referral, or like you see that person you're with like just flying away, and like then you're like, oh, I'm too slow, and it's just like plays with your mind. So it has pros and cons. It's just hard. It's really hard to like keep the same pace, whether it's slower or faster with someone. But it does feel good to have a few days along the way where like you're not alone. What has been the hardest unexpected part? That's a tough one. I'd say I've always considered that it. No, I wouldn't say that. Like I didn't think my mind would play such a huge role. Um, it can be boring. It can be long. Something is beautiful for an hour, but then after 12 hours in the same beautiful thing, it's just too much. I think the hardest part has been realizing that like by racing it, I'm not actually enjoying it. Racing for hours, for days, couple days, 3 days, 4 days has worked out for me in the past. Racing for weeks kind of doesn't make sense to me anymore. It's like I think one of my realization was like when I went through what they call the Great Basin, which is like this remote, wild, empty space. I did the whole thing like 183 miles that day, and the sky was beautiful. It was all beautiful. I mean, for a few hours, then it was just endless. The sky was awesome, clear sky, and I could have camped there. I could have stopped at like 8 p.m. I had a tent and a stove. I could have made dinner or something and spent a great night in the middle of the quietest place in the world. But instead, I pushed through. I pushed to a point where like I was just hating the whole thing, and ended up eating in a Subway at a truck stop and sleeping in a shitty interstate motel. And it dawned on me that like, what's the point of that? Like, transforming something? Why transforming something so beautiful into something I hate, into suffering? And it took me a few days to realize that, but 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 yeah, now I've realized it. You're halfway in. How do you feel? I'm actually way more than halfway in now because I've been procrastinating on answering your questions. I'm 2,000 miles in, and it's actually 100% of the ride for me because I've decided that it was the end of the ride for me, and I'm happy about this decision. I feel relieved. I'm happy I made it that far. Happy I biked further than I've ever biked. Happy that had I experienced everything I've experienced, and yeah, I'm happy I went through this, and happy I made it so far. Have you cried? Oh my, many times. I'd say the very first time was like I was getting out of Lincoln, Montana. It was raining. It actually rained all day. I was alone, and like after like I don't know, maybe 10 hours on my own there on that day, I got to this valley, and there was a train, one of those American trains that like goes forever, like carrying containers. And I don't know why I just started waving at him, and like he blew the whistle back, and it was like that human connection that I hadn't had for too long, and then I just like I don't know, I started crying. Along the way, since I've cried a few times, it was more about like just despair, like starting to hate the whole thing, just like when you get to the top of a mountain, like you expect a downhill because that's what it looks like on the elevation profile, and then all you see are like more and more and more, just like little climbs, and my heart would just sink. Um, how many times have you wanted to quit? Why haven't you quit? Um, too many times. There were days where like I think I wanted to quit like an hour or so into the ride, but I think the first thing I did on the first day was kind of like changing the way I would approach the event. I was going in like saying like, oh yeah, I'm gonna race it, and then very quickly I realized, well, if I'm actually want to go far, I mean at that point it was more like, but finishing. If I actually want to finish, I need to sleep a little more, and so the first night was actually amazing. I stopped at sunset in the middle of a big circus of mountains, and decided to just be there. I had a great night instead of pushing through the next town like most people did. I think the first night was actually one of the nights that I did well, because I followed my heart, and like at some point I was so tired. I was like, just like I'm gonna enjoy those last minutes of sunlight, which goes pretty late when you're in Canada. It's like 11:30 or something, and just lay there instead of making this day miserable. Or actually, more miserable than it was, because it was actually a mud fest and it was really hard. I've had days where I didn't really think about quitting much. I don't think there's been a single day where I didn't think about it. And actually, at this point, I think I should stop talking about quitting. It's more like, at what point is it enough? At what point do I feel like I've achieved enough? I've taken away what I needed to take away. Initially, it was about quitting. Then along the way, it became more like, is it enough? Like, and I guess why haven't I quit? Well, I just did drop out. Like last night, I was like out of Del Norte, Colorado, at about 2,000 miles, and I could just not pedal. My body was fine. It's just like my head would control everything. I just couldn't. I was even walking on flat, and then I went down a hill, and like I got a side tear on my tire, so it blew up, and I couldn't even fix it because my hands are numb, and it was too tight or whatever. I was trying to remove the valve from my tire, and it I just I couldn't do it anymore. I was like, what? I couldn't justify it to myself. There were cars like driving by every half hour or so, like, and every single car would be like, I'll wait for the next one and hitch my way back to the next town. And then suddenly some like old woman living like she right there by the lake just came by, and she was like, do you need help? And then I just started crying. And at that point I realized I was done. It took me a little while to like accept a ride down to town, but I did, and I'm happy I did. What has been your best source of motivation? That's a tough one. I think my motivation was reaching a point where like I would not be disappointed about myself. That point I thought would be the finish. Obviously, it's much easier to move on when you reach like an unarguable success, which in this case was like the Mexico border. But I think like I've reached a point where like, yeah, it's enough. Like I've experienced what I wanted to experience, I think, and I've been through the pain and joys and everything else that I wanted to experience. I've experienced the journey. I haven't experienced the end, the finish, the reward, like the common definition of the reward. I haven't experienced that, but I've experienced everything else, I believe. How is your mind? What are you thinking about these days? Well, now that I've dropped out, I'm actually in a hotel waiting for my wife to pick me up from this town in the middle of nowhere. I'm relieved. I'm obviously, I mean, it's not hasn't been an easy decision to drop out, but I'm happy about it. I don't think I don't think it changes anything to get to the end or not. Really, it's just symbolic. The end is where you want it to be. At the end of the day, this race could go to Mexico. You could go to South America. Like, you or I am the only one who can decide what ends for me. The ride, the race obviously stops in at the bar now. But the ride, the journey, it stops wherever I want it to stop. And I think it stops here.